Friends, this is Alvaro with the channel Uniquely Mary, and today we have the amazing opportunity to explore the book Martyrs of the Eucharist, Stories to Inspire Eucharistic Amazement. We're here with Jason Gale, the Vice President of Content and Production for 10 Books. What were some of your, or what is your favorite saint story out of the book?
Yeah, so I think there was 29 stories, I believe, in there.
Yeah.
But like I said, it's divided into those four parts. So, those martyred for celebrating or attending Mass, those martyred for defending the Eucharist, those who risked their lives for the Eucharist, and then the other deaths connected. And I think it's the final story of the book is one of my favorites, and it's the other deaths connected with the Blessed Sacrament. And it's the story of Saint Nicholas Owen, and he was martyred in London in 1606. So during those penal years where it was illegal to be Catholic, if you were caught attending Mass, evangelizing, preaching, any of those things, you'd be killed. You'd be in prison, probably tortured, and then killed. So, and that was a long period in England. I mean, you're talking, part of the 1500s and 1600s. And so he grew up in a devout Catholic household. He was one of four brothers. He had three other brothers. Two of them became priests. And just to kind of lay the stage of what this, and he did a lot of it as a lay person. The entry in the Butler's Lives of the Saints, so the classic saint stories that everybody reads, it begins his biography with this line. It says, "Perhaps no single person contributed more to the preservation of the Catholic religion in England during the penal times than a humble artisan called Nicholas Owen." Wow. So you're talking, he later became, I think it's essentially like a third order Jesuit. But so how did he kind of gain this introduction in Butler's Lives of the Saints? Well, if you've ever heard of the word priest hole, this is where it comes from. And so during these years of persecution, homes would be modified to hide priests, to hide vestments, to hide vessels, all these things in certain homes. And this is what Nicholas did. He would go around to these different homes. He would always work at night, never during the day. And he would build these priest holes. And it wasn't just like, I'm going to modify the back of a closet to create a little hiding place. No, he would do entire renovations. Some of them would hold up to 10 people. Others would have intricate exits. So it would be not just a hiding place, but it would actually, some of them would go down a story or two and there would be a hidden exit to an alleyway so that the priest could get away. There was even, the guards that would go and do this, they were called priest hunters. And so, I mean, you can imagine kind of the cat and mouse game that they played, especially in London. And one of the things that Nicholas did was before he would build one of these priest holes, he would attend and he would attend Mass in that home, and he would offer all of his work to God in that Mass, so that other future Masses could be held in that home. And then he would receive the Eucharist before beginning work. And so, but part of his genius was, he never made one like the other. He created dummy hiding places so that the guards would come in and find an easy hiding place and be like, oh, there's nobody here. Whereas that was just a diversion.
Wow.
So, yeah. So I mean, he was arrested 3 times, and finally he was caught. He was arrested with 2 other people, and he was put in prison, tortured. He was racked. Tortured, but he never, and they knew he was one of the ones that were building these, and he never divulged where any of the priest holes were. He never divulged any of that, even though he was tortured and racked for multiple days and finally died. He was canonized with the other kind of the 40 martyrs of England and Wales. He was one of the 40 martyrs there, but kind of just that, again, why is that my favorite story? I don't know. It's just, it's amazing. Like, to devote your life to saying, like, I'm going to do my best to assist in this one area. Everything else is up to God. The priest, find, all of those very important things and even higher things, but I can serve in this one way. I have a talent for this, and I can serve in this way. When you're thinking about like doing something like that, it says, okay, well, I can, help out this family, and they'll be able to have mass here for the locals and stuff like that. So, maybe I'll help out a few people by doing this. No, like, again, no, like it said there in the butler's entry, right? No, perhaps no other person contributed more to the preservation of the Catholic faith than this, humble guy who knew how to build. So it's a truly inspiring story, I think. And just, I don't know, it's just an awesome story.
So right now I want to let him speak, maybe tell us a little bit about himself, and we're going to get into this book and explore it and talk about what it is and the way that it can impact our lives today. So Jason, tell us a little bit about yourself, the work that you do, and then about the author of this book.
Sure. Thanks for having me on, Alvaro. It's good to be here. So a little bit about myself. I'm the vice president of content production here at Tan Books. So I help with everything from looking at manuscripts, taking the book all the way through the process and turning it into a beautiful product like the one we're going to talk about today. I have a background in theology, did my undergrad in theology, graduate school. I got a license in catechetics from Maryvale. Married, got 7 kids, so crazy busy always.
Yeah.
But I like staying busy, so that's very helpful. And then so my background's mostly been, and before taking this position, my background was in teaching and parish work and stuff. So I love the work I do here at Tan. I love Tan Books, and we have a simple mission of helping people become saints, and our kind of method of doing that is putting saints out there, putting the works of the saints, the lives of the saints, and just the beauty, simplicity of their own writings, putting that in the hands of Catholics all over the world, and especially those saints who are a little more elusive, sometimes, so we love to focus on, Ligori, and just some of the other forgotten ones that are out there that aren't as read as much. I'll say that they're not as read as much as the popes and the things of the past 100 years, but we like to look at the more broader tradition of the church and see what did other saints say, whether it be De Sales, Ligori. Like I said, they have so many sermons out there, and so at Tan, this is our mission, this is our goal, and I love what I do.
Yeah, I think that's amazing because there's so much material out there, and sometimes we can live in the church as if there wasn't, or if there aren't just libraries of things that we can access, and it's hard to find that.
Yeah.
It's not easily accessible. Sometimes you just get quotes here and there. So to have it kind of published newly, something from the past, I think it is just an awesome thing to do.
Yeah, and like I said, we even have a project of trying to find some of those lost works that are still in Latin and getting them translated into English for the first time. One book we have that's amazing is, speaking of martyrs, it's it's called A Tale of Death and Glory, and it's the story of Saint Sebastian, which was, I guess we've had it for maybe 1 or 2 years now, but it was never translated in English, and so we have a friend, Benedictine monk, who translates it, and just a phenomenal story, and he's got a beautiful homily in there that he gives and everything. It's amazing. So anyways.
Awesome. So tell us about the book today, Martyrs of the Eucharist.
Yeah.
And this author, maybe how long has this book been out? I was able to read a little bit of it, but I don't know its history.
Yeah, sure. So this book just launched, I think maybe a couple of weeks ago. And before we get into the book itself, I want to talk a little bit about the author, because the author, his name is Father Francis Sophie, and he was a third order Dominican, so you'll see OP after his name, but he was a priest of the Archdiocese of Mobile for 30 years, but he just recently passed away on June 22nd of 2024.
Okay.
He had a very long fight with cancer, And we did our best to try to get the book published before he passed away, but unfortunately we missed it by a little bit. He served in a variety of positions there in Mobile. He went to University of St. Thomas in Rome, and earned a master's in divinity from St. Charles Borromeo in Philadelphia, and another master's. He earned his master's in systematic theology from there. So he was very, very learned, loved to read, but he also had this desire to be a Dominican, which I think that does come out in the book. That zeal for souls, that desire to preach and to bring people to Christ. And so in 2021, he became a third order Dominican. I think they're called diocesan Dominicans.
Yeah.
He received the religious name Saint Vincent, who was a miracle worker and a prolific preacher. And so Father's not only his education, but having served in a variety of parishes and functions there in the Diocese of Mobile, and then combine that with the Dominican charisms and stuff, I think it just makes for a wonderful book, or a wonderful place for that book to come from. And so, like you said, the book itself is Martyrs of the Eucharist, stories to inspire Eucharistic amazement. And it's it's not a long book. It's a short read, and it's a great collection of stories that are not just focused on like one type. So the book is divided up into 4 parts. And so the first part is those who have died going to Mass or celebrating Mass. So that's the first part. The second part then is, let me get here, those martyred in defense or protection of the Most Blessed Sacrament. The third part is those who risk their lives for the Most Blessed Sacrament. And part 4 is other deaths connected with the Eucharist. So he's included a variety of stories here, not just those who have died, celebrating Mass or something like that. So it's a great collection of different kinds of martyrs that are out there.
Oh, sorry, I don't know what that was. It must have been like an alarm here in the house. I'll cut that out. But I guess the devil doesn't like this. But I might even leave that in there because that might be kind of interesting. I really liked how he divided it up. I mean, it definitely, the first thing I think of, it makes me think of St. Thomas Aquinas, but it was just beautiful how he kind of made those distinctions. And then another thing that I loved about the book is that it's short chapters, 2 to 3 pages.
Yeah.
But it feels like it's like 10 pages packed into that, such intense stories, to where afterwards you're left really meditating on that. Like it really sticks with you. So in that sense, it was an easy read, but it was really, when I was reading it yesterday in adoration, it was great material for meditation, to think about the things that these different saints did. What's unique about this book? Because there's many saints books out there. Who do you think is a target audience? Who is it for?
Yeah, so I think I would give this to every adult, but even like my older teens, I think they would. I think it's important for them to, it's accessible to them. Kids read less. That's just the way it kind of is. As much as we try to fight against that and get our children to read and stuff. So I would wholeheartedly give this to any adult, like you said, for adoration. And then also like older teens, I think it would be good because I think it also, especially for them, it brings home the, I think they'll think differently when they go to Mass, because they'll recall the story and like, these people in this book, they would have to hide, and they would have to sneak around at night just to attend Mass, and then they were killed for it. And here I am, getting upset because I have to, wear stuffy clothes or something like that to go to Mass, or it's a whole hour, or God forbid the priest go over an hour. I think it helps set the reality of what's going on, because again, because God is veiled in the sacrament, it's easy to become numb in our senses to what is actually present up there, what is actually happening on the altar. It's easy for us to forget that. And so I think for when we bring those two aspects together, martyrdom and the Eucharist, I think it just opens up, and this is kind of the idea of Eucharistic amazement, is it opens up our eyes a little bit more to the reality of what is happening here, the reality of the lives of the saints, but also like the reality. It is the Eucharist is that same reality today. It's the same reality that they were killed for, that they risked their lives for, and so I think in the way that Father Sophie does this, it's more than just saint stories. He has that, because of that Dominican charism, he has that zeal for souls, and so, like you said, he includes a lot of reflections at the end. So every chapter ends with a reflection written by Father Sophie. And one of the things I think for your audience to understand is that Father Sophie wrote a lot of this book while he understood that he was dying. And I think that again quickly changes your perspective a lot when you have something like that. And he told a fellow priest, he says, the greatest grace is to know death is imminent, and the blessing to prepare for death has been given to me. What an amazing witness that in and of itself, to not go into death begrudgingly or anything like that. So I'd say, when we talk about what makes this book unique, is it's not just the collection, the way he put it together, but also his own where he is writing from, right?
Yeah.
So he's writing from a kind of Last Testament kind of perspective, and I think it really comes out, especially like his desire for people to come back to belief and devotion to the Eucharist. That's his goal of this book, is to bring people back to that. So it's not just a book of stories, but it's I think really a book with a mission behind it, and God willing, it now has hopefully the prayers of Father Sophie from heaven following it, interceding for anybody who reads this book.
There's so much there. I mean, thinking about this book as a priest's last will and testament, that a lot of times people will think to themselves, okay, when I die, I want to do this, or I want to pray that, but often the way our death happens, maybe we might not even be conscious. We don't even know when it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Whereas he could see that in the future, and then makes the choice to leave this book as his last work. So I think that's something amazing. And I always think about when you read the writings of the saints, people that have gone before us, you kind of have this sense of, I'm not just reading this book, but that person is praying for me.
Yeah.
So there's almost like a grace writing there. Another thing that I was reflecting on yesterday when I was reading it is just this idea that something is worth what people are willing to pay for it. And you kind of were alluding to this a little bit. So whenever we go to Mass and it's easy, I mean, it isn't, you could perhaps say that the Eucharist seems cheap to us because it's just maybe a 5-minute drive or a 10-minute drive, like it is for me. I don't have to pay a heavy price other than some of the inconveniences to go, but they're really not many. Whereas these people literally paid the ultimate price, and they convey to us the kind of infiniteness of the Eucharist that you just can't get from like a great sermon or homily or teaching. You have to see it through the death of another person, unfortunately. But there's these saints that give us that gift. They leave us the sense of, this is of such value.
Right.
And even yesterday, it filled me with Eucharistic amazement without me even trying. Just reading the stories helped me remember that. And I think that's a something that we really need, because I know that, in our country we had the Eucharistic revival, but there's nothing more reviving than people who have died for the Eucharist. Like, just
Yep.
that can revive faith in people in a way that other things just can't. And that's something that really stood out to me about the book.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and for me, even in my own kind of, reversion back to the church, the saints were huge. They played a huge part, and there's so many, there's so many stories. I think that's not unique. Like, I think almost everybody that's reverted back to the Catholic faith or even converted, the saints played a role, period. Whether it be their writings or their witness or anything like that, like they are that, connection to us who are still on this side of heaven, striving for, Christian perfection, striving for virtue and holiness. They're are, in a real way, Christ is our ultimate hope. But along the journey, I think these saints, they're kind of like dogmas. They're light poles along the journey to help us. But they're also effective in that they pray for us. They intercede for us, which I think is additionally beneficial for the entire church. I mean, when we talk about a Eucharistic revival, I think a big thing that we need to do, even as little parishes and stuff, is invoke the saints, because the saints saw reality different. They had a clearness and a simplicity in the way that they looked at all of reality, even to the point of seeing their own death and saying, guess what? The Eucharist is more important. It's more important that I help this priest stay safe so that he can celebrate the Eucharist for somebody else. It's important. It's more important for me to bring the Eucharist to somebody who's homebound than to not risk my life to do that. So it's there's a the word meaning, witness, right? Those especially those martyrs, right? It's there's a real hope in reading their stories and understanding we believe in the same reality. Again, do I and I need to continue to grow in my own devotion to the Eucharist.
Going off that point and maybe kind of touching on some of our modern experience, I'm trying to think. It was a chapter on Saint Edmund. I kept thinking it was going to be Saint Edmund Campion, but it was one of the those that had been martyred in England, describing that they were hiding the priest. And I kept getting confused with his last name. I was like, I guess there's another English Saint Edmund, might have been a common name, but connecting that to, and this is just sort of pointing out what a lot of people saw, in 2020 with COVID. I think a lot of people, including myself, were thinking we were going to see something different from the church with everything that happened. I was just expecting to see some of the stories that you read about before, where despite the plague, priests would go out and do all these things. And it was, I think, really disappointing for a lot of people to see that. But I think it also showed our own lack of faith, our own fear, cowardness, however you want to say that. And then reading these stories, you can see these particular saints who didn't do that. We don't know what was going on in the church at the time, but we can ask those saints to pray for our church, that if there is a next time, that we respond more courageously, that no matter what, we bring the Eucharist, that we don't kind of hide it away from people. Maybe, I know maybe, a little bit controversial kind of connecting that, but to me, that was the first thing that I thought of when I read those stories.
Oh yeah. I mean, if you set aside maybe the cause, but you go back to a lot of the English martyrs, right? It was illegal to be Catholic in England, so therefore we can just say the churches were shut down. We'll just say that, and it was far worse, obviously, because you can go and you can visit the ruins of the monasteries, and they destroyed all of those, and so but you had amazing saints come out of that time period who were who said, it doesn't matter, like, you can't make my faith illegal. I'm still going to celebrate it. I'm still going to do that. And so, like, you get amazing stories that come out of the English martyrs in those penal years of England.
Yeah, and I think especially us being Americans, English speaking, there's about as close a connection to those people as you can get to say they're literally our older brothers. We need
Yeah.
to really see that and kind of make that connection here. For me, one of the things that I love, it's like I would call that like this sort of holy genius that these saints come up with the craziest, most creative invention of whatever it is. In this case, these priest holes that you just think clearly God must have given that saint, given him that inspiration, because just even that is unbelievable. That would be different each one from another. So if they find one and they learn its pattern, they can't. That's not going to help them for other ones.
Yeah.
And then all the different saints, how they come up with these things that it's like that love for God that they have mixed with grace, and then putting their brains to the limit to think of the most amazing things. And then also, I'm always amazed with these different martyrs that it's not just kind of, it's like that Jewish idea of you get the best specimen, kind of the unblemished lamb. I mean, these are just amazing people. It's not just any person being martyred. It's someone that's like the best human specimen you could possibly find, which on the one hand is tragic because, man, we could have really used him for 30 more years. But on the other hand, it's just so beautiful to where, I don't know, it really moves you to think, wow, but it also calls you to want to be better, to be that, to be almost like, God, let me be that, so to speak, that best human that could be put on the altar for you.
I think it's kind of the convergence of beauty and tragedy. There's something beautiful in the tragedy of the saints, because their lives are cut short. Their lives many times involved so much pain and suffering, and yet at the same time it's beautiful. It's the contradiction of the cross, right? A beautiful crucifix, right? That's when you if you were to put on like a secular hat for an instance, you'd be like, there's something wrong with that. But what makes it beautiful is you understand the reason, you understand the purpose. Why did Christ die on the cross? To forgive our sins, to make reparation for all of our sins, to open heaven for us to have a chance at life with God inside the Trinity, right? We understand that purpose so that suffering becomes beautiful. But it's still, it's still tragic. It's still there's something tragic with it. And so, and this is again when we talk about the witness of a martyr, right? It's that witness to the crucifixion. It's that witness to Christ as the ultimate martyr, the par excellence of martyrdom is Christ himself, and in a very real way, all of these saints in their unique ways, right, reflect that same sacrifice, that same offering to God the Father.
Yeah, I think even in a more particular way than maybe other saints that live a long time, because I think for humans, I mean, or at least speaking for myself, I'll kind of think to myself, okay, you want to live a good long life and then go to heaven. There's kind of that sort of idea, but that they sacrifice that to sort of say, hey, heaven, even for an extra 30 years on earth, heaven is way better. And sometimes because it seems so abstract to us, we haven't seen it, it's kind of shrouded in mystery. It's hard to make that jump. And then these saints, I think, help you want to take that leap to think that this has to be great. It has to be far beyond whatever I can conceive of right now.
Yeah. So, and it also means when those things happen, when, churches are shut down and there's difficult decisions to be made, you have to prioritize your faith the Eucharist above anything else, which goes against our natural instinct to protect our own life, right? We have to be willing to risk that. It's a tough tough decision to make, but but we have examples like this to draw strength from, I think.
Sometimes you hear in terms of the Eucharist, people talk about kind of the statistics and things like that. I think even at the beginning of the book, it says that.
Yeah.
So in our current sort of culture of disbelief, and we know that, why do you think this book is so needed in the church?
Yeah. So I think, first off, what we just talked about, Catholics need to think about martyrdom, need to think about, and not just, the church believes in different kinds of martyrdom. So you have red martyrdom, which is what this book is about. Then you have white martyrdom, which are those people who suffered for Christ and belief in the Christian faith, but never shed any blood. So they were just simply persecuted. And there's also kind of a lesser known one called green martyrdom, which is when people kind of live a life of dedicated to penance, to reparation, to sacrifices that are kind of self-inflicted. So think of hermits, certain monastic practices and things like that. But even some saints, they talk about kind of a martyrdom of pinpricks as well. Like hopefully we should all be able to make that sacrifice in that one moment if we had to. But suffering is an essential part of the Christian faith. And so this is when we need to think about martyrdom, and part of that means suffering, and this is why we take up certain Christian practices. St. Louis de Montfort, he wrote about this aspect very plainly, about, he said, a lack of mortification was incompatible for serious Catholics. His quote was, "Be careful not to admit into your society those delicate and sensitive people who are afraid of the slightest pinprick, who cry out and complain at the least pain, who know nothing of the hair shirt, the discipline, or other instruments of penance, and who mingle with their fashionable devotions a most refined, tedious, and a most studied lack of mortification." So when you read the lives of the saints, there's nothing in there about, don't be too hard on yourself. God loves you. He loves you where you're at. You're exactly where you need to be. No, if you read any of the lives of the saints, they're saying, no, increase your devotion, increase your practices, do the hard things, go deeper. The love of God is not shallow by any stretch. It is as deep as we can go. And so if we want to continue to grow and make spiritual progress, it has to involve suffering. I remember, when a while back when I was in college, I went to I was in adoration. It was one of those big kind of conference adorations, and Father Benedict Rochelle was the preacher. And he just said, if you're not suffering, you're not Catholic. So so why is this book needed today? It brings in that aspect for Catholics to think about is martyrdom and therefore suffering. If we can't accept suffering, we'll never be able to accept martyrdom. And so this is kind of a good way to really begin to contemplate that, but contemplate it with the lives of the saints and the stories that are so inspirational that are there. And then second, we need to increase our devotion to the Eucharist. This was one of Father Sophie's main goals in writing the book. And he, like you said, he includes the devastating statistics of belief in the Eucharist, the practice of the Catholic faith. Again, that idea of, don't be so hard on yourself. You're doing the best you can, no saint, ever said that, or even when you think about the God will never give you more than you can handle. There's something wrong with that, right? Yeah. I mean, look at these saints. I mean, he gave them, he said, here's martyrdom. And they said, we'll take it. we'll take it. It's, again, it's completely unhelpful. There's no sentiment like that in the writings of the saints. God
or
gave,
even in the scriptures.
right. So, which is a difficult, and I'm not saying that, Catholics that struggle with this, that it's, that they're somehow, weak or something like that. No, it's a real struggle. I mean, think about, if you have kids, right? The last thing you ever want to do is see your children suffer.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, how are they going to learn virtue if there's zero suffering in their life?
Yeah.
It's impossible. How are
I
they?
think of that quote from St. Louis de Montfort, and the sense there is that you have a group of people that are devout Catholics, and not to allow people that every little pain bothers them. But I mean, people, it's pretty obvious, and almost everyone would agree that that's our whole society now. And
Yeah.
you see how, even just from a secular perspective, it doesn't work. It doesn't build anything worth looking at. Whereas when you go to, kind of like Europe, for instance, like places that people want to visit, let's say for architecture, it's because of people that, even from a secular perspective, sacrifice themselves, were willing to die to build buildings. Those are the things you want to go see. Like I live in Houston. There's nothing to come see here, building wise. Everything's sort of ugly, and so even from a secular perspective, you never get to the Olympics the easy way.
Oh yeah.
And so on every level, we have to re-embrace that. And you see in parenting how you could do extreme harm to your child by not challenging them, even to difficult degrees. That they really become weak in a way that I don't think anyone can admire, even from a secular perspective. That's what I love, that this is true for everyone, but especially for us in our faith.
Absolutely. And parents have the foresight to be able to say, like, the little suffering I'm making you go through now is going to save you a world of pain in the future. It creates a life of virtue. I mean, when you think about, okay, if I were to die, what would I, like, if I could leave my children anything, a good Catholic would start listing off the virtues, right? But think about, you can't just give your child patience, right? You have to teach them to be patient. You have to teach, how do you hand them generosity? You give them something of value, and then you ask them, are you willing to give that up? And so for the child that makes the first dollar, okay, are you willing to offer that up to something else? Mm-hmm. That's a very difficult thing for parents to do, for parents to teach their kids, because of the culture we live in. But as Catholics, excuse me, when we understand the end, the road makes sense.
We're almost at the end of our time. I know we didn't get to that last question, but and I'll cut this part out. But Jason, what do you think could be some closing thoughts? Maybe for someone who hasn't read the book, like a way to, I mean, it's just awesome. That's what I would say. This book is just awesome. But for you to tell someone to make the jump to say, hey, get this book, read it, and maybe share it, what would you tell them?
Yeah. So the biggest thing I would say is, in the writings of the saints across the history of the church, a few things that they've always had in common is their love and devotion to Christ, especially in the Eucharist. They're willing to die. They're willing to celebrate Mass, to attend Mass, their devotion to Mass. And also, many of the saints, they always kept the idea of death before them. To go back to the, St. Charles Borromeo's, famous little, book, he said, if we want to die well, we have to live well. Mm-hmm. And so that idea of understanding death, it really helps the human brain put things into right perspective. Mm-hmm. And for us as Catholics, we have to do that on a daily basis because of the world we live in, because of the world of disbelief, of attacks, of persecution that really exists. we have to keep our priorities straight. Thinking about death helps us. Understanding martyrdom, understanding suffering helps us in putting those things not only into priority, but also into practice, but also to the simple message of keeping the Eucharist at the center of your spiritual life. If we want to grow in the Eucharist, if we want to grow in our spiritual life, go to the Eucharist, contemplate the Eucharist, go to adoration, sit and rest before God. And this is where all of this leads. And, Father Sophie's kind of goal of the book is to understand the lives of the saints, to give us hope, but also in his reflections, to help draw the mind and the heart to God, to lead towards contemplation. And the best place to contemplate is before the Eucharist.
Amen. I hope everyone that has a chance that watches this video will go to 10 Books. Go check this book out. It's really, really amazing. I think it will help you grow in your love for the Eucharist, help you see what's possible, how much more we can love it, and you'll be inspired by the stories of these saints. Thank you, Jason, for joining us, and thank you everyone for joining us in this video. And as I always like to say, I'll see you in the next one.